Welcome. We're here with Congressman Dan Lundgren here at the West Point Community Hall, where he just presented $96,000 check for the local CHIPS program. And CHIPS actually stands for, and I have to read my notes here, Calaveras Healthy Impact Product Solutions. And how did you get involved with this?
Well, they contacted our office, and then I was up here about 6 months ago to see what they were talking about. This community has been devastated, as a number of communities in the foothills and the mountains throughout California and other parts of the country, by federal policy cutting down on the ability to do timbering.
Exactly.
And so we have large levels of unemployment, a lot of kids who qualify for the food stamp program. And that, of course, is absolutely no criticism of them. It is an observation about what's happened to the community when you take the timber industry out. CHIPS program is an effort to try and take brush and small diameter trees and make them into real products, and so that you can actually get employment here. I think as a result of this grant and some other things, there's going to be training of about 22, 24 people. This is to gather it, this is also to use the chippers, it's also to have the products, and it's also to go out and market the products. So it's a beginning of an effort to try and deal with what's out there. The fuel that otherwise, fires like we just had in South Lake Tahoe ought to be turned into usable products, and hopefully, I believe, in the prospect of alternative energy. If you can produce ethanol out of corn, I'm hopeful that you can produce something like that out of this fuel that's out there, so that ultimately we're going to have jobs up here, we're going to have area revitalized, we're going to actually assist in the energy needs of the nation. This is a beginning start on more elementary products, but it is a start. And I'm just really excited about it.
Now, last year, during last session, didn't you co-sponsor a bill with Feinstein and Boxer, a $500,000 earmark for the program?
We have worked with others in the delegation to try and get this and other such projects up and going around the state. My hope is we'll go beyond just the grants. And when the president talks about the cellulosic potential of sagegrass, and we talk about corn, and we talk about other means of alternative energy, we've got to put an emphasis on this. And I've been trying to fight that fight back there.
Okay. Now, what else can you do besides give the grants or push for the grants to make sure that these types of programs are sustainable, not only here but across the country?
Well, what we have to do is we have to raise the consciousness of people across the country. They don't know, for instance, that there is true suffering in our communities. They don't realize that these are proud people who go back generations in terms of a work ethic. They're not working because they don't want to work. They're not working because they would have to leave the area in which they and their families have been committed for a long time to find any type of work. They want to see if there's some way that we can make a balance between having healthy forests and sustaining an economy. And I happen to believe that is possible. We've been too much at loggerheads saying it's either or. Seems to me it ought to be both to some extent. Neither side getting everything they want. Secondly, because of the real strong emphasis on alternative energy sources, this is a natural. Right now we see acres going up in flames when we have a fire like we have at South Lake Tahoe. I'd hate to see that up and down the entire state with the fuel that's in our forest. Let's try and be inventive and creative and do something that helps the people, establishes a healthier forest, and at the same time begins to deal with our needs in alternative forms of energy.
Have you seen any other programs like this?
I've never seen anything that is that has begun at the local level with the type of activity that they're talking about here. Hopefully it'll be a model for other communities to use. We have to find viable ways of cleaning up our forests, clearing our forests of this fuel that otherwise is going to be a disaster, and giving employment to the people. These are hard-working folks, go back generations working in the timber industry. Man, you look at them, they're hardy. They want to do work, and that's one of the messages we need to get across. Most people don't live in the mountains. They don't live in the foothills. They've never dealt with agriculture. They've never dealt with timbering. They think milk comes out of a carton. They wouldn't know that it comes from a cow. they use forest products, but they don't intuitively understand them as forest products. There's got to be ways for us to try and make that connection so that people begin to have a greater sensitivity to the concerns of folks in neighborhoods such as West Point.
Okay, so it's sort of a sense of community between the urban and rural counties.
I hope so.
Okay.
I hope so.
Now, before I let you go, I have to ask you about the immigration
Yes.
bill. What happened with the immigration bill?
It fell of its own weight in the Senate, and the reason is they really went backwards in terms of their approach, and the President did too. What I mean by that is, instead of saying, look, we understand the message from 1986, and I was part of that. I was the Republican floor manager for Simpson-Mazzoli. We thought enforcement was important, at least as important as anything else in the bill.
Yes.
And we thought that if we had employer sanctions and we had true enforcement on the border and in the interior, we would cut down on the magnet that draws illegal aliens here, and we would actually be able to get this under control. But what happened was, while we had a legalization program that went through, there was virtually no enforcement, no implementation of the employer sanctions or other parts of the enforcement package.
Yes.
And so the message should be, and was not heard by the President, not heard by the Senate, enforcement first. And it doesn't mean you have to separate into two bills. It means you have to give credible evidence of the fact we're actually going to enforce.
Yes.
The American people are not stupid. They look at us and they say, hey, you promised us 21 years ago to be enforcement. There wasn't any.
Yeah.
And why should we believe you now? Ronald Reagan said when he was president and dealing with the Soviets, trust but verify. What the Senate said is trust us. What the President said on this is trust us. Well, the American people looked at it and said, last time you told us that 21 years ago, you fooled us.
Okay.
So we want trust and verify as part of the package. Then we'll look to these other parts of the solution to the immigration issue. And I think that's what happened.
So it's a trust issue then. So I'm hearing you say that should the American public gain some sort of trust back into Congress, Senate, that then it's more believable that these immigration issues will be
If we regain the trust on the enforcement side of the package, then I think, well, not only do I think it, but every poll shows that the American people will be willing to look at the things, dealing with the number of people who've been here illegally for a substantial period of time, figuring out the question about temporary worker program, how it would work, where it would work, in what areas. Every poll shows the American people say, hey, we'll look at that,
Yes.
but don't do it before you have enforcement.
Now, are you confident that that's going to happen?
Not in the short term.
Okay, but in the long term?
Well, it has to. We cannot allow this festering wound to continue to remain open. We as a nation not only have to control our borders just from the standpoint of immigration, and I mean we're an immigrant nation, but we're a nation of laws.
Yes.
As Father Hesburgh, the former president of the University of Notre Dame, said when I was working years ago on this, he said we have to close the back door of illegal immigration so we can keep the front door of legal immigration open. Seems to make sense. But now we're talking about it in different terms. 21 years ago, we weren't worried about terrorism as we are now.
Yes, it's a different
And while I can't give you an example, other than the guy who tried to come through our border in Vancouver and blow up LAX, I can't give you another example of people who come into the country illegally and embarked on terrorist attacks. We do know that as we harden other potential targets, as we make it tougher for people to come in by air, by boat, by train, through trucks, the bad guys will look for other things. So they will look at what they consider the soft underbelly of our system of security, and that's our land borders. We shouldn't wait until they actually do it. We have to do it now.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for taking time to talk with us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here on the Pine Tree.